Hi, everyone. My name is Diana McAlintal.
And I'm Nick Wagner.
And we are Team RCIA. And probably some of you, many of you in the United States and around the world might be experiencing a lot of restrictions these next few weeks because of the widespread coronavirus that's going around. And so lots of dioceses, our own diocese, has suspended all gatherings, including Mass, for at least several weeks, which means many of us won't be celebrating the scrutinies at the Sunday Masses.
So we wanted to talk a little bit about some strategies for you to use. And let's start with, if this was normal times, all 3 scrutinies would be required. And to dispense from any of the scrutinies for any reason, like if a catechumen got sick or some tragedy happened in their life they had to attend to, you need to get the bishop to actually dispense that person from the scrutinies. You can find that in paragraph 20 of the RCIA. So that would be normal times.
So the scrutinies are that important.
Yes.
And so this unusual time makes it even more significant for us to look at ways how we can celebrate these very important rituals, because they complete the conversion of the elect during this time of purification and enlightenment. And so as Nick said in paragraph 20, it says, the bishop may dispense from one of the scrutinies for serious reasons or in extraordinary circumstances, even for 2.
Now, if you're in an area like San Jose where all gatherings of any kind have been suspended, then that would be the dispensation.
Yes.
But if you're in some dioceses have suspended the obligation for Mass, but not the Mass itself. And in that case, it would be a gray area whether the obligation for the scrutiny is suspended or not. And I would, if I were in that diocese, I would contact the bishop to find out. And I would probably try to also go ahead and have the scrutiny because they're that important for the formation of the elect.
Mm-hmm. So let's take a look at some ways that we can celebrate the scrutinies, even if your local community is not gathering for the Sunday Masses.
So if you're not gathering for Sunday Mass, or you're not, or the obligation is suspended, we're not medical experts, but our understanding of things the CDC says is the risk is when you gather in large groups. So one strategy that might be acceptable in your area is that you would gather in just a small group with the catechumenate community and the families and friends of the elect who are going to celebrate the scrutinies. And you could do that at a weekday Mass if you're still having weekday Mass, or you could do it at Liturgy of the Word service with just that community. And in that case, the presider would need to be either a priest or a deacon for that kind of a liturgy.
And these small group gatherings could take place at the parish, if that's a possibility, or at a person's home, or at another suitable meeting place. But the abnormalcy of this time is that you would gather with a smaller group of people. So for sure, the godparents, if you have a lot of elect, you might gather separately with each elect and their godparents and family and friends, with the other people in your RCIA team. But again, there's no minimal number of people that you need, except for a smaller group of people to gather.
Now, if you're in an area where it's just not possible to gather at all in any way whatsoever, then you're not going to be able to celebrate the scrutiny. But what you can do is rely on the prayer of the domestic church, and so provide some prayer resources around the readings for the given scrutiny. So for the first scrutiny, woman at the well; second scrutiny, man born blind; third scrutiny, the raising of Lazarus, and some of the intercessions that go along with those scrutinies, and provide a simple outline for the domestic church to reflect on those readings and the prayers, and maybe read the readings in kind of a Lectio Divina format, and do some mystagogical reflection on the readings.
And those readings are really important in the scrutinies, because those are really the scrutinizing element of the ritual itself. Especially the gospel texts for those 3 scrutinies. and the intercessions that go along with each of those gospel readings. So take a look at your RCIA text and share those intercessory texts with your elect if you're unable to gather with them to celebrate these rites. Another idea is maybe even ask your presider who was going to preside at those Sundays to, if they have a homily already available for the elect, they could share that homily that they would have given for those elect at those scrutiny rites.
And then if you've got somebody in your parish who's kind of tech savvy and is able to kind of coordinate this, maybe that's you, to set this up for you, you could plan to have a meeting online with something like Zoom or GoToWebinar or Facebook Live, where you all the elect and their families gather at the same time online, and you lead a reading, a Lectio Divina kind of reading, the intercessions and mystagogical reflection and so on. So you're kind of still together in community, even though it's virtual and even though it's not actually a scrutiny, but it is. Yeah. It is a reflection on the scrutiny. Diana wrote an article in which she's made the point that it's really the readings themselves that do the scrutinizing. So if you can provide some substantial prayerful attention to the readings, that will have a scrutinizing effect, even though it's not officially a scrutiny.
And if you are able to gather to celebrate the scrutinies, it does not have to be on Sunday. Right. It can be sometime during the week.
Weekday or an evening.
Yes. But it should be somewhere within that third week of Lent, fourth week of Lent, fifth week of Lent. If for some reason we are going to be in suspension here for our liturgical celebrations, even through Holy Week, and you decide to do baptisms later this year, perhaps in Pentecost, you could maybe celebrate the scrutinies closer to that time, but we're in uncharted territory here, so we really need to think about it. But as far as possible, we still can celebrate these weeks of Lent with those scrutiny rites.
The one thing you want to pay attention to if you're moving the scrutinies out of their ordinary time is they still need to be celebrated 3 weeks, 3 weeks in a row. You can't kind of do them all in the same evening. They're part of the reason for doing the scrutinies is that there's a separation time for them to kind of cause an effect, marinate on the elect. Exactly.
Yeah, and whenever you do celebrate them, you would always use those gospel readings as well as the ritual mass texts and prayers that go along with those scrutinies. Even though if you're not celebrating it within a mass, there is an opening prayer that begins that celebration. And so if you're celebrating it at a weekday mass or at a gathering during the week, use those readings as well as the texts that are found in the Roman Missal and your RCIA text.
Now, let's say a word too about the presentations. During this time, we usually have the presentation of the Creed and the presentation of the Lord's Prayer. I know in some communities, they kind of attach them to the scrutinies and celebrate them at the same time of the scrutinies, and that's really not permitted. And when we do that, it kind of wrecks the form and the meaning of both rituals. So don't do that.
And you can't do it because there are specific gospel texts for those presentations. And so you really can't combine those two.
Yeah. So the same things would apply if you're able to gather in a small group or any kind of group, then that's the first choice. If you need to do provide some sort of prayer resource for doing this in the domestic church, again, it wouldn't be the actual presentations, but it would be a prayerful experience around the presentations. One important thing to note about the presentations, a lot of communities think the presentation is an actual giving over of a scroll or a piece of paper or something that has the words of the Creed and the Lord's Prayer on it. That's not what the presentations are about. They're an oral presentation. And so, again, in the domestic church, if there are baptized people in the home, they could present the Creed, present the Lord's Prayer to the elect. Or, again, if you have the technical savvy to do it, you could get a community of the faithful online together with the elect, and they could verbally present the Creed and the Lord's Prayer. Again, it wouldn't be a technically the rite of presentation, but it would be a prayerful experience around presenting those texts.
Although some liturgical theologians could say, hey, you know, that is a community that is gathered, and there is the giving and the receiving, which is an oral action. And so maybe, you know, this is all, this entire time is challenging our sacramental sensibilities and inviting us to widen our understanding of how we gather together. But one thing that is a little challenge for going back to the scrutinies is that one of the primary symbols is the laying on of hands during the scrutinies itself. In the presentations, there aren't any kinds of physical actions like that involve touch, but scrutinies really do that. And so whoever is presiding, whoever is leading, as well as the people who are present, you want to make sure that they've washed their hands, no one is sick, and that there's no risk there.
And it's a laying on the hands on top of the head, not on the face. So the face is the big issue, that you don't want to be touching the face.
But still, keep your hands
and if you're doing this in the domestic church, again, the baptized members of the communities could lay hands on the elect, even though it's not an actual scrutiny. It still has that prayer element.
So I think we've
Well, just to summarize, the first priority would be to gather normally at Sunday Mass with the elect to celebrate the scrutinies if possible. If that's not possible, the second best option is to gather in a small group, either weekday Mass or some kind of prayer service, either at the church or in someone's home. And then if that's not possible, the final option is to have some sort of prayer reflection in the domestic church.
And did we say who can preside at those non-Sunday celebration masses?
Just to reiterate that, if it's a scrutiny that's not at a Sunday Mass, the presider is either a priest or a deacon. For the presentations, the rite does not specifically allow for a deacon to preside, so it'd have to be a priest that preside for it to be an actual presentation.
So there are our challenges, but again, they are invitations for us to take seriously the health risks that we are currently in, as well as the importance of our rites and the rituals that we celebrate during this significant and beautiful time of year. There's a lot of grace that we can encounter here, even in this unusual time. So we continue to pray with you and with your elect, and especially we pray for those who are sick, for their caregivers, and everyone who has been affected by this health crisis that we are in. Remember, I think it's a benefit for me to remember that wherever 2 or 3 are gathered, there Christ is present. And so let's make use of that grace that we have been given to pray together in all ways, right?
All right, everyone. Thanks as always for your great work. We're keeping you in our prayers. We know how difficult time this is for you. God bless.
Thank you.